Chapter 631 The funniest thing in the world. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Sunny froze, unsure of what the wisest course of action would be. What to do. After meeting Solvayne, he had a heavy prejudice against crossing paths with powerful figures of the Kingdom of Hope. And Noctis was very powerful, of that, he had no doubt. In fact, Sunny was pretty sure that the friendly young man who was looking at him with a charming smile was none other than one of the 7 immortal shackles of the imprisoned demon, the mysterious Lord of the East. Even without taking into account the otherworldly presence that all transcendence seemed to possess, it was easy to tell there was vast and dreadful power within Noctis, hiding behind the deceptively carefree gleam of his lustrous eyes. Plus, there was a citadel in the eastern reaches of the Chained Isles literally called the Sanctuary of Noctis. Who else could have been the ruler there? Who else could have possessed the beautiful flying ship, and had their image put on the miraculous coins? So, Sunny had no desire to meet the strange immortal, even though Noctis seemed weirdly friendly and unthreatening. Actually, that only made him more terrifying. But was there even a choice? It was not like Sunny was in any shape to escape from a saint, let alone an immortal sorcerer that even corrupted abominations seemed to be wary of. He hesitated for a bit, then sighed, rose, and headed toward the crackling fire. Noticing that, Noctis hummed in satisfaction and then slightly moved his hand. Immediately, droplets of dew flew from the grass, forming a clear stream that swirled around his body, washing the dry blood away. An exquisite silk cloak rose from the ground, wrapping itself around him. The diamond sickle whistled through the air, shaking itself clean, and hung itself on the sorcerer's belt. Sunny continued walking, still clutching his aching chest, and observed the bizarre occurrence with a deadpan expression. Damn, why don't I know how to perform tricks like that? That would make life so much easier. Finally, under the gloating gaze of the vindictive gloomy shadow, he walked into the circle of light and couldn't help but tremble when the saint threw a curious glance at him. It was hard to remain calm in front of a being that could obliterate you with one finger. The whole situation was sort of ridiculous, actually. Noctis looked like a pampered young man in bright silks, with an effeminate face and the body of someone who had never once exerted themselves physically. His hands were smooth and uncalloused, and his build was slender and soft, almost frail. Sunny, on the other hand, was a towering demon clad in an intricate and fearsome suit of onyx armor, his gaunt figure brimming with ferocious might. He had twisting horns, 4 powerful arms, and a mouth full of sharp fangs, his eyes completely black and inhuman. And yet, it was the demon who was afraid of the pampered young man, and not the other way around. Ridiculous. Noctis studied the tenebrous demon in front of him, his smile growing wider. Ah, what a fortuitous encounter. A shadow. Did fate guide you to me, I wonder? Sunny grew very still. Fate. What does he mean? The sorcerer, meanwhile, gestured for him to sit. Sit down, shadow. It seems that you are unwell. Rest for a bit and warm yourself. Ednel.co. Sunny hesitated, then lowered himself to the ground, sitting across the dancing flames from the transcendent. He gleaned at Noctis's soul to make sure that he was right to call the young man so, and saw a single resplendent core shining in his chest. That was a soul of a saint, indeed. Noctis remained silent for a while, and then asked. Say, shadow, what is your name? Sunny lingered, then stretched a hand forward and scratched 2 runes into one of the stones surrounding the fire. Sorcerer's brows flew up. Those runes, huh? Goodness gracious, now I am sad that I wasn't as studious as my mentors demanded, all that time ago. Those boring charlatans. Well, let's see, star. No, that should be sun. Lost sun. Absence of sun. Sunless. Sunny nodded, causing Noctis to beam with a prideful grin. Ha! There's indeed no one smarter than me in the Kingdom of Hope. The rumors are true, well, of course they are true, I'm the one who paid storytellers to spread them. In any case, Sunless, what a fitting name you have. Truly a name worthy of a shadow, a little on the nose, if you ask me, but very nice nevertheless. Well done. Sunny tilted his head, staring at the saint in confusion. What the hell, is this guy just eccentric or completely insane? Noctis didn't mind being stared at, and instead seemed to enjoy it a great deal. He looked at the onyx demon in return, the smile frozen on his face. The humor in his eyes slowly disappeared, making way for a strange, dangerous gleam. Sunless, since fate itself has brought us together, can you answer me a simple question? Feeling tension spreading through his exhausted body, Sunny grew grim, and then slowly nodded. This is not good. Not good at all. Damn it. Why is everyone in this place crazy? Noctis leaned forward and said, his voice deceptively calm and friendly. Tell me, do you, perhaps, have a knife cut from a single piece of black obsidian in your possession? Sunny shivered. How the hell does he know? But there was nothing he could do. The question had been asked, and now, he was compelled to answer. He struggled against the flaw for as long as he could, then gritted his teeth and nodded again. The immortal sorcerer stared at Sunny for a few moments, his lustrous eyes reflecting moonlight like two shining pools of pale blue radiance. Then, he suddenly threw his head back and exploded with joyful laughter, as though he had just heard the funniest joke in history. Noctis laughed so hard that tears appeared in his eyes, glistening in the moonlight like crystals. Finally, he satiated his mirth and glanced at Sunny once again, the carefree smile returning to his face. Ah, Sunless, fate is the funniest thing in the world, don't you think? You and I have a feeling that we are going to be great friends, Sunless. Believe it. Chapter 632 Broken Heart. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Sunny froze, his tired body tensing up. His vertical pupils narrowed, and breath escaped through his gritted fangs with a hissing sound. Damnation. Despite the strange reactions of the eccentric saint, he wasn't fooled. Out here in the Kingdom of Hope, there was no power greater than that of the immortal wardens that guarded its imprisoned queen. And the only weakness the immortals had were the knives that held their fates hostage. The obsidian knife was a weapon that could destroy one of the eternal shackles, and as such, it was a priceless treasure. The very concept of value was too mundane and pedestrian to be applied to it. And he had just revealed the fact that he possessed one to an infinitely more powerful being. To one of the very immortals whose lives the knife could reap. It didn't matter if the obsidian knife was meant for Noctis himself or one of the other shackles. If it contained his own fate, then the sorcerer would stop at nothing to gain control of it, so that no one else could. If it contained another's, he would be able to exert influence over one of the wardens, or dispose of them completely. Noctis would undoubtedly try to take the knife. But, inexplicably, the sorcerer did nothing of the sort. Instead, as Sunny stared at him in confusion, Noctis relaxed and started to hum a joyful melody. Then, he suddenly clapped his hands in excitement. Ah, Sunless. How fortunate it is that I've met you. His smile dimmed a little, and his eyes, for a moment, grew dark and terrifying. Before we met, you see, I was prepared to do something rather drastic. But now, there is no need. The divination truly worked. He remained silent for a few moments, and then seamlessly switched back to his usual carefree persona. This wonderful occasion demands a celebration. Yes, we simply must celebrate, while you're still alive, which won't be for long, regretfully, so, better keep it simple. Sunny flinched. What? Meanwhile, something rustled in the air, and a figure of a very tall man suddenly appeared out of the darkness. Sunny tensed, surprised that the stranger managed to approach them unnoticed. Why had he not sensed the bastard? The figure calmly stepped into the light, revealing itself to not be a man at all. Instead, it was a wooden mannequin carved into a semblance of a man, wearing an elegant livery with embroidered sleeves and hem. It had simple features and held a tray with grapes, fresh fruit, and several beautifully painted amphoras of wine. The mannequin looked disturbingly familiar. In fact, it bore a close resemblance to a far less feral, ancient, and corrupted version of a sailor doll, who had been the nightmare creatures populating Shipwreck Island before Sunny and the fire keepers eradicated them. The strange sailor doll placed the tray in front of them, stepped back into the darkness, and froze, becoming undistinguishable from a dead piece of wood. Noctis smiled and reached out for one of the amphoras. Sunny's thoughts, meanwhile, were in turmoil. What the hell does he mean, I won't be alive for long? He opened his mouth, then closed it in frustration and hurriedly traced several runes in the ash. What? Why? The sorcerer scowled as he tried to read them, then gave him an unapologetic smile. Why are we keeping it so simple? Yes, of course, you would be confused. See, usually, I would have thrown a great feast to celebrate the occasion. I am the most gracious person in the Kingdom of Hope, after all. But, sadly, we will have to be satisfied with this shameful. Sunny furiously shook his head, and then drew several more runes. Sunless. Death. Why? Noctis stared at him with surprise. Well, aren't you dying? That broken heart of yours is giving out. I thought that this was why you came here, to spend your last few days near his resting place. Sunny blinked a few times, trying to digest what he had just heard. Was his one remaining heart really failing? It did feel like it was on the verge of tearing apart, during his escape from the black tar monster. It continued to ache dully still. And whose resting place was Noctis talking about? No, that was not important right now. He erased the previous runes and traced two more. Heart. Broken. Noctis frowned. Wait, do you, perhaps, not want to die? I didn't say anything before in order to respect your wishes, but if dying peacefully was not your intention, then why are you wasting time drinking wine with me? Sunless. Are you crazy? Sunny stared at him for a few moments, unamused, his eyes full of resentment. Then, he ground his fangs and wrote. No. Don't know. Maybe. Heart. Heal. The sorcerer scratched his head. You are a very strange shadow, Sunless. Well, mending a broken heart is not easy. And yours is not only broken, you also seem to have misplaced one. Until you replace the lost heart, there is no point in healing the one that remains. It will just break apart again. But where would a shadow creature like you find a suitable heart in this godforsaken land? He sighed. The servants of shadow are all gone, and so are the servants of heart. Without them, only the greatest of healers would be able to build a heart worthy of a shadow demon from scratch. Noctis looked down dejectedly. But then, a mischievous smile appeared on his face. Luckily, I am the most gifted and renowned healer in the Kingdom of Hope. For me, creating a new heart for you won't be much of a problem. But, Sunless, despite the fact that you and I are dear friends, a favor like that is not something to be given lightly. I wouldn't want to put a strain on our friendship, you know. So, you will have to do something for me, too. That would only be polite, don't you think? Sunny had a feeling that he was being swindled. After all, he was an accomplished swindler himself. However, that didn't really matter. The part of Noctis's words about the inevitable failure of his one remaining heart, at least, rang true. Perhaps if Sunny managed to not put any excessive strain on it in the future, things would be fine. But what were the chances of him having a peaceful life in a nightmare? 0. He desperately needed a functioning heart, and better yet, 2 of them. Only then would he be back to his full strength and ready to face the challenges that lay ahead. Sunny sighed and drew several runes, already suspecting what he would hear. He wants the damned knife, doesn't he? That bastard. Sunless. Do. What? Noctis looked at him for a few moments, then smiled. What he said next, however, was not what Sunny expected to hear. The sorcerer suddenly turned around and gestured south. Oh, it's nothing much, really. You see, there's an abandoned fortress on the edge of this island. All I want is for you to climb inside, and remain there until dawn. Actually, it will be best if you can fall asleep. So, a little nap in exchange for a new heart. Doesn't sound too bad, does it? I mean, it's just a few hours of sleep, really, what's the worst that could happen? The gloomy shadow grabbed its head in utter despair. Chapter 633 Dead Fortress. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Sunny remained silent for a long time, looking at Noctis with a grim expression. Finally, he shifted and drew several runes, the onyx claw of his armored gauntlet moving through the ash with swift precision. Fortress. Danger. Inside. The sorcerer laughed. Danger, of course there is danger. But don't worry. It is nothing that you won't be able to handle. I think. Believe, even. Regardless, there's no one in the entire Kingdom of Hope better suited for this task. Thank you, Sunless. So, hurry up. Time's a-wasting. Sunny scowled, unamused by the fact that Noctis avoided the question. Unwilling to let go, he growled and pointed to the runes again. The sorcerer sighed wistfully. It's not that I don't want to tell you, Sunless. It's just that there's no point. You won't remember, anyway, but this will benefit us both, trust me. This fortress once belonged to a friend of mine. He was one of Hope's shackles, just like me, and a shadow, just like you. Do you see now why I think that fate itself has brought us together? Sunny held his breath. So, I was right. Noctis is indeed one of the immortals. And, more than that, one of the original 7 had been a follower of Shadow God. Only 5 wardens were still alive, and none of them held dominion over the south, so, it was safe to assume that this Shadow Lord was dead. Suddenly, the sorcerer's comment about this island being someone's resting place made more sense. If so, maybe there were some relics that the Transcendent of Shadows left behind in the fortress. That changed things. A little. Sunny hesitated for a while, and then gestured to his chest. Noctis smiled. What? Surely, you are not doubting my skill. Rest assured, Sunless, I'll create a wonderful new heart for you. I'll even replace the fingers you seem to be missing, as a bonus. Unless not having fingers is your preference, of course. Sunny stared at him for a few minutes, then sighed and stood up. Picking up a bunch of grapes, he glanced at the eccentric sorcerer one more time, and then headed south, toward the edge of the island where the abandoned fortress stood. You won't remember it, anyway. I wonder what the hell did he mean? As he walked, Sunny noticed several clusters of beautiful white flowers growing here and there among the emerald grass. The closer to the fortress he came, the more of these flowers there were. Despite the fact that it was the middle of the night, their buds were open, filling the air with a faint, but pleasant smell. A deep scowl appeared on his face. These flowers. They looked vaguely familiar. He slowly ate the sweet, succulent grapes and searched his memory for a hint of where he might have seen them. After a while, his expression turned even darker. There was an island in the eastern reaches of the Chained Isles, not too far from the sanctuary of Noctis, covered by a vast and beautiful field of such white flowers. Everyone, even the most competent cohorts of Awakened and those from the White Feather clan, avoided this island like a plague. The ground there was littered with bones of all kinds, hidden beneath the delicate white petals. As soon as a person stepped on the surface of the island, they would feel an irresistible desire to stop, rest, and fall asleep. And if they succumbed to that desire, none ever woke up. Sunny silently cursed. Is that bastard trying to kill me? But, for some reason, he had trouble believing that Noctis simply wanted him dead. A saint had far easier ways to kill an awakened, let alone someone as tired and weakened as him. There was no need to go to such lengths. So, what the sorcerer had said must have been true, or at least close to it. He believed that Sonny was uniquely suited for the task and had a good chance of accomplishing it alive. But why? What was so special about Sonny? What could he do that even a transcendent could not? Was it because he was connected to Shadow God, as the previous owner of the fortress had been? Full of dark thoughts, he crested another hill and saw the familiar silhouette of the Boundary stronghold not too far away. It was in much better condition than it had been in the future. In fact, it almost looked whole, if not for the moss covering its walls, the lack of lights, and the deathly silence that enveloped it. Sonny would have thought that the castle was still inhabited by humans. The tall walls built of grey stone rose high into the night sky, and the massive gates were closed shut. The ancient fortress was bathed in the pale moonlight, looking somber and foreboding, like a cursed tomb. Sonny grimaced. Not ominous at all. Still clutching his chest, he made his way down the hill and approached the menacing stronghold. Its walls had not crumbled yet, so the path he had taken to get inside the last time did not exist yet. Full of grim unease, Sonny thrust his claws into the ancient stone and started climbing. These walls were nothing compared to the Great Wall of the Dark City. Getting to the top was not going to be hard, even for a human. And currently, he wasn't even human. He was a demon, be it a dying one. Soon, he finally reached the top of the wall and crouched on its lip, looking down into the empty courtyard. Here, the signs of abandonment were more pronounced. There were dust and dirt everywhere, with weeds growing through the ancient cobblestones. The fortress was desolate and hollow, devoid of anyone to inhabit and take care of it. He hesitated with a decision for a bit, and then reluctantly sent two of his shadows away to explore the stronghold. If there was indeed a powerful creature nesting inside, they would surely find it. Minutes passed in tense anticipation. The shadows glided through the empty corridors and halls of the abandoned stronghold, through its towers and dungeons. However, no matter where they looked, they did not find any sign of life. What they did find, however, were corpses. Here and there, human skeletons lay, still dressed in archaic garments and armor. There was no sign of struggle around them, no tears on their clothes, and no apparent wounds on their bodies. It just seemed as though the former garrison of the stronghold had lowered themselves to the ground and died for no reason whatsoever. All of it was just too eerie. Curse it all, curse the damned immortals, and curse this damned place. Sonny almost turned around and ran, but then, his chest pulsed with pain, reminding him of the reason for why he had come here. With a deep sigh, he jumped down from the lip of the wall and walked toward the main structure of the fortress. Time to find me a soft bed. Sonny entered the dungeon, summoned the shadows back, and walked through the silent halls on his way to the higher levels of the massive tower. Once there, he walked around for a bit, searching for a suitable room, and soon found one that seemed to be both comfortable and well protected. Unceremoniously throwing a corpse in a rotten nightgown off the bed, he lay down in its place and tiredly closed his eyes. Sure, this place was beyond creepy, but he was, in fact, tired to the bone and in desperate need of rest. Some sleep would do him good. What's the big deal, anyway? I've slept in far worse places. Before falling into the embrace of oblivion, he summoned Saint from the shadows and gave her a mental command to watch over him. After hesitating for a bit, Sonny did the same with the soul serpent. Only once the two shadows assumed guard did he allow himself to relax. In the silence of the abandoned fortress, Sonny could easily hear the strained beating of his heart. However, he was too exhausted to pay it any attention. Just a few minutes later, he was already sound asleep. And just a moment before falling into deep slumber, with his mind already half gone, he thought that he heard an unexpected sound somewhere close, but also far away. It was like the ringing of hooves on the cold stone floors. Chapter 634 Pillar of Flame. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Sonny woke up just before dawn. He lay still for a while, reluctant to leave the warm embrace of the blankets. Then, with a sigh, he sat up and shivered in the morning cold. It was time to face a new day, and there was a lot to do. He had no excuses to laze about. A dull pain suddenly radiated through his chest. He looked down with a confused expression, studying the old scars covering his tan, bronze skin. "That I guess it's going to rain." Then, an ivory arm suddenly appeared from beneath the blankets, caressing his firm muscles. "Is it morning already?" Sonny smiled, grasped the hand of his wife, and nodded. "Yes, my sunshine." She sighed. "All right, go, get ready. I'll wake up the little devil." He remained motionless, leisurely enjoying the sight of the beauty he had somehow managed to coax into marrying a ruffian like him, dressing herself, careful not to disturb the round belly where their second child slept peacefully, with not a care in the world. His smile grew a little wider. "I said go. Today is not the day for your mischief, hoodlum, have you forgotten?" Sonny made a dejected face, then rose and dressed, as well. When he left their quarters, the servants were already hard at work, preparing for the day. When they saw him, each bowed respectfully and greeted him with warm voices. Being subjected to all this adoration and decorum, Sonny had to put on a face worthy of a lord, as well. How bothersome. The servants were going to prepare everything for the upcoming journey, but one thing he had to do himself. That was something that Sonny would not allow anyone else to perform, not for the lack of trust, but simply because it was his duty. Entering the stables, he greeted his steed and went about feeding and watering the noble beast before putting the saddle on his wide back. Sonny might have become a lord of some renown and left his turbulent past behind, but the bond between a warrior and his horse was sacred. Just because the two of them didn't have to risk their lives on a battlefield anymore didn't mean that he would forget it. When all was done, he led the horse to the courtyard and attached the weathered wooden scabbard to the saddle, the cold steel of a beautiful sword hidden safely within. Then, he stared at the scabbard for some time, massaging his aching chest with a distant expression. A subtle, dark expression appeared on his face. After a while, the sound of quick steps headed his way. "Dad!" Sonny turned around and grinned as he caught his son in an iron embrace. "Trying to sneak up on your poor old father, huh? Not so fast. I was sneaking up on monsters long before you were born, brat." The boy giggled, and then took a step back. He was turning 7 today, and on that occasion, his mother had dressed him in the best clothes they had. The little devil almost looked like a proper child, and not a corrupted abomination sent to the mortal realm to torture his helpless parents. "Why did you have to sneak up? Too weak to kill them outright, huh?" Sonny sighed in exasperation and stared at the heavens. "Lady, help me. Why did their son have to inherit his poisonous tongue, as well?" The boy, meanwhile, turned around and looked into the distance, where the beautiful silhouette of the ivory tower could already be seen in the morning haze. His eyes widened. "Dad, is it true? Am I going to see her today?" The lady. Sonny lingered for a few moments, then nodded. "Of course. You are turning 7, are you not? Today is a divine day. So, you will meet our goddess. To introduce yourself, and pledge yourself to her service." His son frowned. "But she isn't really a goddess, is she? Won't other gods be angry with me?" Sonny laughed. "Gods? Gods are too great and mighty to know what jealousy means, kid. Why would they mind? Lady Hope gives us shelter and safety, protects us from the corruption, from war, famine, plague. And even ourselves. If that is not something worthy of worship, then I don't know what is." With that, he jumped into the saddle, and then lifted the boy to sit in front of him. "Let's go." They left the manor and followed the road of white stones through a peaceful forest and up the hill. The horse walked forward at a steady pace, easily bearing the weight of 2 riders. Sunshine fell through the canopy of leaves in wide beams, making their surroundings look like a fairy tale. Sunny was enjoying the beauty of the forest and its tranquility. A long time ago, before coming to the Kingdom of Hope, he had known neither. His life had been nothing but bloodshed and pain, battle after battle, war after war. Only after coming to this realm and deciding to remain here did he learn the truth of how joyous life could be. Especially when shared with those you love. His son, however, didn't know anything about strife and darkness. This peace was all he had ever known. For that reason, he was extremely bored. The boy fidgeted for a few minutes, then stared at the hilt of Sunny's sword. One day, I'm going to have a sword of my own. It will be way bigger and sharper than yours, old man. Mark my words. Sunny laughed. What do you need a sword for? His son glanced at him with confusion. What do you mean, what for? To become an awakened. A warrior, like you. Sunny looked away and didn't respond for a while. His eyes grew distant. His heart ached. Why did it ache so much today? I was a warrior once, true. But I never chose to be a warrior. I just became one to survive. In the Kingdom of Hope, you don't need to fight, suffer, and kill others to live a long and happy life. Why would you still want to be a warrior? The boy fell silent, a comically thoughtful frown appearing on his face. He turned away and didn't say anything else for a while. Sunny doubted that his son really understood what he meant. And he hoped that the boy never would. Closing his eyes, he said a silent prayer. Hail to you, desire, demon of hope. Please, hear my yearning. Protect my son from all the horrors of the world and save him, as you have saved me. Silently, the three of them, the man, the boy, and the horse, left the forest and climbed the tall hill. From its top, a breathtaking sight opened before them. In front of them, a vast plain was bathed in sunlight, emerald grass shining with the morning dew. Here and there, farmsteads and fields stood, golden wheat swaying in the wind. Sparkling ribbons of rivers cut the plain, and in the distance, a beautiful city built of white stone rose from the ground, with a magnificent pagoda towering above it. Sunny couldn't help but smile. No matter how many times he saw it, he could help but feel a little bit sentimental. Hey, do you want to wave to your mother? I'm sure she's looking in this direction right now. His son glanced at him with a pitying expression. Are you crazy? She won't see us. We're too far away. Sunny laughed. Says who? He turned around and looked back, at a similar landscape that lay behind them. Gazing past the forest, he saw the small town and a humble stone manor standing near it. From this distance, the building looked like a toy. He raised his hand and waved. Hey, Dad. Sunny scoffed. What? Are you going to mock me some more? The boy shook his head. No. It's just. What is wrong with the sky? It looks funny. Ha. Sunny raised his head, then frowned in confusion. The sky, indeed, looked funny. The sun was still climbing up, but there seemed to be a second one right above them, swelling with incandescent light. The sky itself was growing brighter and brighter, as if permeated with intense heat. The clouds were all gone. A gust of hot wind suddenly blew past them. His eyes suddenly narrowed. Wait. In the next second, a colossal pillar of incandescent flame suddenly fell from the sky, piercing the plain and shattering the land like glass. A blinding flash drowned the world in white, and through it, a terrible sound rolled across the forest. Deafened, Sunny felt his son screaming, but could not hear his voice. At the point where the pillar of flame fell, the ground itself was split open and thrown into the air, colossal pieces of melted earth raining down fire, ash, and death. The hill on which they stood shook, and then shifted, throwing Sunny off the horse. No. Still dazed, he tried to find his son, but failed. Instead, his gaze fell on the small town and the stone manor that stood in the distance. As Sunny watched in horror, the ground opened up, with fountains of fire shooting into the sky. The houses were instantly devoured by the flames and incinerated, turning into clouds of ash. No, 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 in the next moment, the whole hill crumbled. The last thing Sunny saw before being smothered by the avalanche of scorching earth was the fragile figure of his son being swallowed by flames. No, and then, he died. Pain, pain, pain. Why did his heart hurt so much? Sunny opened his eyes in the darkness and sat down, throwing the furs aside. He stared at his feeble chest, then touched it with a shaking hand, surprised. Since when did his chest start to ache during the night? Ah, being old is not fun. Chasing the remnants of a terrible nightmare away, he struggled to sit up and massaged his joints for a while, waiting until some flexibility returned to them. Then, he slowly stood up and closed his eyes, listening to the sounds of the sacred grove that enveloped him. Well, at least he woke up alive. At his age, that was already an accomplishment. If only his heart didn't ache so much. But that was just what being old meant. Every dawn brought a new ache. Actually, Sunny would have been more scared if he woke up and suddenly felt perfectly fine. In any case, it was time to face a new day. Chapter 635 The Will of Gods. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Using a wooden cane, Sunny walked out of his hut and breathed in the clear, sweet air of the sacred grove. The ancient trees rustled gently, as if greeting him. The forest was slowly waking up, emerald leaves longing to be bathed in the warmth of the sun once more. A chilly fog was flowing between the mighty trunks, suffused with the vibrant lilac light of the early dawn. The nightingales sang cheerfully, jumping from branch to branch. The sight of it was familiar, beautiful, and calming. Truly, the Grove of Heart God was the jewel of the Kingdom of Hope. How lucky he was to have been born and spend most of his life here. These trees had stood upon the ancient land before it had been shattered, weathered the terrible cataclysm of Desire's imprisonment, and were going to remain standing here long after he was dead and forgotten, his bones buried at their roots. Now that Sunny was old and didn't have a lot of time left to live, that thought was very comforting. A human's life might be fleeting, but the beautiful grove was eternal. He patted one of the ancient oaks as an old friend, sighed, and limped toward the water spring to fill his jug. Since Sunny's hut stood at the outskirts of the grove, he could see the edge of the island through the spaces between the tree trunks. As always, it rose and fell slowly, the heavenly chains rattling from time to time. Everything was just as usual, which was the very best thing in the world. Sunny had lived a long life. Some of it was peaceful, and some of it was turbulent, but luckily, the turbulent times had not visited this quiet forest for a long, long time. And that was the only thing that he had always wanted, to live a quiet and tranquil life, far away from all the strife and misfortune of the ever-changing world. Change always brought ruin on its wings. Sunny wanted no part of it. However, today, his desires were not meant to come true. Something unexpected did happen, disturbing the familiar routine of his day. At the very edge of the island, a mighty black steed suddenly appeared, as if jumping from below, where a giant chain connected to the soil of the sacred grove. He walked forward at a steady pace, approaching the line of ancient trees. The steed had no saddle, but there was a rider on his back. A pretty young woman in a simple red tunic sat there, her ivory legs svelte and bare. She had a graceful figure, a face so lovely that it simply demanded to be gazed upon, and chestnut hair that fell down like a silken waterfall. Sunny stared at the young woman, mesmerized by her beauty. Then, he scoffed, and shook his head. "What are you even doing, old fool? Your days of ogling pretty girls are long over. This beauty is young enough to be your granddaughter. Have some shame, you vile lecher." He chuckled wryly, and then changed his course to greet the unexpected guest. A dozen meters or so away from the line of trees, the young beauty stopped her horse, jumped down with breathtaking grace, and knelt in the soft grass, looking down as other pilgrims would usually do. Sonny made his way toward the girl, panting a little from the strain, and tried to put on a smile worthy of an enlightened elder. For some reason, the closer he got to the beauty, the worse his heart ached. "Ah, what's wrong with this frail body of mine today? Greetings, young lady. Ah. Welcome. What brings you to the Heart Grove? Tell this old man your worries, maybe I'll be able to help." The beauty did not raise her head, still looking down, as if to show her respect and reverence. Her voice, when she spoke, was melodious and calm. However, Sonny had been meeting pilgrims like her for many decades. All of them came here overwhelmed by sorrows and regret. That was why they sought out a passage to the sacred grove. This was a place of solace. He could sense a deep ocean of darkness hiding behind the facade of calmness the young woman had put on, too. She said, "That I seek audience with the lady of the grove." Sonny lingered for a bit, then sighed. So young, and yet so troubled, how sad. Then, he leaned on his cane and smiled. Well, she ought to be up and about, by now. How about that? I'll wait with you until the lady arrives. The young beauty didn't answer, and simply continued to stare down, still like a statue. Her breathing was deep and steady. Even her scary black horse seemed patient and indifferent. Suddenly, Sonny felt a strange unease. He took a closer look at the girl, and frowned. "Do I have dementia now? What, in the name of hope, is that?" His eyes seemed to be playing tricks on him. Sonny could swear that he saw a radiant sphere of light burning inside the young beauty's chest, not that he was looking in that direction. Without any reason, his hand suddenly stretched sideways, his palm opening, as if waiting to grasp something out of the air. Sonny stared at it in confusion. Weird. What are you doing, stupid hand? He awkwardly hid the willful hand behind his back and cleared his throat. Maybe he didn't quite recover from that terrible nightmare yet. As he did so, the young woman suddenly spoke, her head still bowed. "Tell me, have you ever seen the ivory tower?" What an unexpected question. Sonny grinned. "Oh, sure. When I was a senseless youth, not much older than you." It might not look like it, but this elder was quite a wastrel once. "I ran away from home and went on an adventure. That was when I saw the Ivory City, and many other things. But eventually, I came back to this grove. There is nowhere better than home, I believe." He thought for a few moments, and then said, "Why do you ask?" The young woman remained silent for a while. "That I heard that there's an evil demon locked inside the tower. That the gods put her there as a punishment for her malevolence, corruption, and pride." "Do you think it's true?" Sonny chuckled. "Ah, that. Sometimes I forget how much knowledge has been lost by us, the inhabitants of the Kingdom of Hope. Yes, young lady, there is indeed a demon imprisoned within the ivory tower. However, she was never evil, malevolent, or corrupt. In fact, Hope was very kind and generous to us, humans." The beauty shifted slightly. "Oh. Why did the gods punish her, then?" Sonny sighed dejectedly. "That is the question, isn't it? Why destroy this land and put its kind lady in shackles? Who knows? If mortals like us could know the will of gods, then, maybe, we'd be gods instead." There it was again. The radiant flame in the young woman's chest. He wasn't imagining things, it was really there. Sonny was about to try and get a better look, uncaring of how improper such an attempt would seem, but at that moment, a dearly familiar voice came from behind him. However, he had never heard that voice sound so somber and grave. The Lady of the Grove said, "Why are you here, Sylvain?" Chapter 636 Desecration. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Why have you come here, Sylvain? Sunny turned around, looking at the delicate woman who stood behind him, her dress woven out of simple green fabric, a girdle of tree bark wrapped around her thin waist. Despite looking only slightly older than their guest, with soft skin and sparkling hazel eyes, she had a calm and confident presence about her that brought peace and a feeling of safety to all who surrounded her. The woman looked beautiful, wise, and young. So young. She also resembled Sunny very much. As always, seeing her brought both warm joy and deep sadness to his heart. Sunny smiled, hiding his sorrow, then said in a tone most gentle and loving. "Hey, Mom. We have a guest." The lady of the grove, his mother, looked at him for a short moment, and then answered in a voice that rang with tension and urgency. "Get away from her, child. Now." Sunny frowned, confused, then did as he was told, arduously pushing his old body forward with the help of the cane. His heart was sending pulses of pain radiating through his chest. Even walking was hard today. Behind him, a dark smile appeared on the face of the young beauty whom his mother called Solvain. She slowly rose from the grass and faced the lady of the grove, her radiant eyes burning with grim light. "You must know why I came here. There is no need to pretend, Ader." Sunny finally reached his mother and stood beside her, turning around to look at the strange pilgrim. Something isn't right. How does she know my mother's name? Was she, perhaps, a powerful awakened? Well, whoever she was, the eternal guardian of the sacred grove was not going to let things get too out of hand. She was not only his mother, but also transcendent Ader, the blessed of heart God, after all. So, there was no reason to worry. Nothing terrible ever happened in the sacred grove. His thoughts were interrupted by the fact that, suddenly, another brilliant sphere of light appeared in view, this one inside the body of his own mother. Sunny stared at her back for a few moments, then glanced at Solvain. He even looked at the horse. Ha! Meanwhile, the smile disappeared from Solvain's beautiful face. Her voice turned cold and sharp as she said. "I have heard rumors that across all of the Kingdom of Hope, a cult of her followers was slowly spreading like a virulent plague. Imagine my surprise, my indignation, my rage. When I discovered that you were the source of this disease." "You?" Sunny's face darkened. So that's what this is all about. He had warned his mother that this might happen. Saying anything good about a demon was tantamount to offending the gods, these days. Maybe he should have followed his own advice and kept his mouth shut earlier. Damnation. Solvain, meanwhile, clenched her fists. "I came here wishing to be proven wrong, but instead, saw that the accusations were true. Your own son is infected by this heresy. How could you betray us so? You have created a cult of demon worshippers. You have nurtured the very thing that we were created to prevent." The lady of the grove scowled. "So what if I did? Do you think, perhaps, that I have forgotten the solemn oath we had given? No, you are the ones who are blind to the will of the Lord of Light. You are the ones who have failed in your duty." Solvain stared at the delicate woman in the green dress for a while, her expression grim. Then, she slowly shook her head. "You are so broken. How did you allow your soul to get so twisted? You, out of all of us, should have been the last to become lost. Your God should have protected you. He is the God of souls, is he not?" Sunny heard his mother chuckle, her voice devoid of amusement. "Be done with it, Solvain. Did you not say that there was no need for us to pretend? Just say what you have come to say, and leave this place. War isn't welcomed here." The young beauty in a red tunic remained silent for a long time, then slowly raised her hand. Sunny frowned, noticing that there was now a strange knife forged out of a single strip of dull metal in it. Where did it come from? His mother suddenly trembled. He had never seen her afraid before. You wouldn't dare." Solvain gritted her teeth. "You forced my hand, Ader. None of us wanted this. But in the end, they all agreed. The lady of the grove fell silent, then shook her head. You lie. Noctis would never abandon me. She took a step forward, and smiled. No one agreed. You are here of your own will, with none of the other chain lords giving their permission. Do you really think that they would allow something like that to happen? No matter which one of us falls, the one who remains will no longer be fateless. The balance of power between us seven will be no irrevocably broken, obliterated. Are you mad? Can you even imagine what kind of disaster will follow? But then, her voice trailed off, and she stumbled. Her beautiful hazel eyes widened. Sunny shivered, feeling that, just then, something had gone terribly, terribly wrong. His mother stared at Solvain, her face growing deathly pale. And then, she whispered. Unless you do, better than any of us. Oh. Oh, Solvain. How ruthless you are. Sunny felt his heartache growing stronger. There was a cold sensation grasping his chest, making him clutch at it with a pained grimace. Arg. What are they even talking about? I don't understand. What is going on? Ader of the Sacred Grove looked down for a long time, then spoke. Her voice was quiet and full of sorrow. I see. I see now. I understand. I should have known, that out of all of us, you are the bravest. This sacrifice, Solvain. Even in the realm of shadows, I won't forget it. With that, she turned to Sunny, who was really confused by what was happening, and smiled sadly. And you? I'm sorry, child. Please forgive me, if you can. With that, his mother faced the beauty in the red tunic and raised her delicate hand, a knife carved out of a single piece of wood suddenly appearing in it, as though out of nowhere. Her voice grew firm and determined. However, Solvain, you should not have never challenged me on this hallowed ground. I won't give up without a fight, and neither will my grove. The young woman facing her smiled, her radiant eyes shining with a furious light. Prove it. Mom, Mom. Sunny crawled through the ash, suffocating on bitter smoke. Tears streamed down his wrinkled cheeks, evaporating because of the terrible heat. His heart ached, oh, it ached so horribly. All of him was in pain. And all around him, the sacred grove burned, enveloped by incinerating, raging fire. He could hear the screams of its inhabitants echoing in the dim darkness, humans and beasts alike, burning alive as their whole world was being slowly turned into ash. How can this be, how? Pushing himself forward with the weak hands of a useless old man, he crawled toward the delicate figure lying on the ground a few meters, so far, away. He refused to die before he reached it. The ground was scorching his palms, which were now covered in terrible blisters, but he persisted, unwilling to give up. Mom! And then, finally, he reached her. The lady of the grove lay dead amidst the fire, shards of a strange iron dagger sizzling in the blood-soaked mud around her. Swallowing tears, Sunny awkwardly hugged her body and let out a stifled howl. Why did it feel so familiar? As though he had felt this pain once, a long time ago, already, in another world. Why are you dead? Weren't you supposed to be immortal? How can this be? No, this is just a bad dream, a nightmare. I need to wake up. Wake up, you old fool. Wake up. But no matter what he did, he couldn't. Even if it was just a nightmare, he was trapped in it, unable to escape. Trapped, in a nightmare. As this strange thought rang in his mind, a trunk of an ancient tree suddenly fell nearby, a whirlwind of fiery sparks and burning debris raising into the air. Sunny stared at it, feeling his vision darken and his thoughts disappear one after another. He was coughing, unable to stop, he couldn't breathe, he was suffocating. How did this happen? The old man stared at the burning forest, his eyes aflame with grief and mad disbelief. How could the sacred grove be destroyed? Wasn't it supposed to stand tall, beautiful and tranquil, long after he was dead? Wasn't it supposed to outlive him? A sense of utter, lightless sorrow and despair drowned his mind, just like smoke was drowning his lungs and pain was drowning his body. This is a nightmare, just a nightmare, it can't be real. No, no, no. That bitter thought was the last one that appeared in Sonny's mind before he fell into the searing darkness. And in that darkness, alone and hurting, he died. Pain, pain, pain. Terrible, torturous pain. His heart was in pain, but so was the rest of him. Sonny couldn't open his eyes, because they were glued together with dried blood. But if he did, all he would see would be the dark walls of a dungeon cell, where he was strapped to a rusty torture device, red-hot metal spikes thrust into his body. Lost and forgotten, far away from the light of the blessed sun. A familiar voice invaded his ears, making him shudder. Ah, you're awake. Good. You've been out of it for so long this time, my friend. Shall we continue? More torture. Sonny sighed, knowing what awaited him all too well. He could barely remember who he was before ending up in this cold dungeon, or why he was being tormented by the owner of the cursed voice. All he knew was pain, darkness, and despair. However, this time, all of it didn't seem so terrible. What could have been worse than the harrowing nightmare he had just seen? Sylvain, Ader, Noctis, the names sounded familiar. Had he known these people once, perhaps? Before this hell? If anything even existed outside of it, of course. In any case, that didn't matter. All that mattered was pain, torment, and hopelessness. He gritted his teeth. It was time to face a new day. Chapter 637 Ron Cage. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. The torture continued without end. Day after day, night after night. Sonny screamed when he had the voice, and remained silent when he lost it. A long time ago, decades ago, he still had pride, and endured the torment without giving the torturer the satisfaction of hearing him howl, cry, and beg. But there was no point. Pride had no place here, only pain. Anyone should have died from the inhuman agony he was subjected to and the terrible wounds dealt to his body. But Sonny didn't die, was unable to die, and so, there was no end to his anguish. Every morning, his wounds were gone, as if he was born anew. Every morning, the torturer returned, and the cycle continued. The torturer, himself, never asked Sonny any questions. It was as though he was tormenting his prisoner just for the sake of torment. However, the master of the dungeon never seemed to enjoy his cruelty. He never reveled in the agony of his victim, and instead seemed almost sad while performing his duties. Why was this happening? How long had it been happening? When would this never-ending nightmare end? Never-ending nightmare. Sonny didn't know, he barely knew himself anymore. All he knew was fear, darkness, and pain. Lord, save me. On one of these days, he opened his eyes to see the torturer entering the cell. His personal executioner was tall and noble in bearing, with skin as white as ivory, lustrous golden hair, and amber eyes that were full of calmness, conviction, and melancholy. Just like always, the torturer started preparing his tools, and just like always, Sonny strained his mangled body, pointlessly trying to break free of his shackles. But this time, something unexpected happened. Sonny froze and stared at the radiant man in front of him, his eyes widening. Can this be? Just like in the harrowing nightmare he had seen a few days ago, there was a beautiful sphere of light burning within the torturer's chest. Its splendor washed over Sonny, making the terrible pain recede for a moment. A weak, pale smile found its way onto his face. Sonny bathed in the light and whispered, "Son." Oh, how he had longed to see the sun again. The torture froze, then slowly turned to him. His amber eyes shone with sudden emotion. "You are speaking again." He took a tentative step forward and studied Sonny's face, then gently caressed it. "Brother, my brother, how good it is to hear your voice once more." Sonny shivered. "Brother. Are we, brothers?" He was weak, and confused. Thoughts danced chaotically in his broken mind, fragile like snowflakes in the summer's heat. He found it hard to concentrate on anything, even if he wanted to. But, he didn't want to. Not for a long time. The torturer smiled sadly. "Have you forgotten even me?" Sonny frowned, trying to remember. Brother, did he have a brother? Yes, he used to, once. His brother was noble, valiant, and wise. His brother was blessed by the Lord of Light. He was entrusted with a sacred duty. And so was Sonny himself. Or maybe he was just remembering shattered fragments of old nightmares. Who could tell? He weakly shook his head. If we are brothers, then why? Why are you torturing me? The torturer remained silent for a while, then laughed sadly. Ah, that old question. You haven't asked it in decades. He leaned forward and looked at Sonny with sorrow. Don't you remember? You were the one who asked me to do this, after all. Sonny's pupils widened. No, no. I asked you. The torturer nodded. As penitence, for the terrible sin you committed. For betraying the trust of the Lord of Light. Was it, a century ago? Yes, almost. He turned away and picked up a long blade, thrusting it into the flames that burned furiously in a golden brazier. It has been almost a century since you abandoned me. Ah, enduring our duty alone was not easy, my brother. It wasn't easy at all. But I never broke my word to you. Sonny stared as the blade was slowly starting to glow inside the flames. Knowing that it would be soon thrust into his flesh instead, he shuddered. If I asked you, then stop. I don't want it anymore. The torturer looked down, then smiled darkly. Stop. But we can't stop. Not until you answer the question. Sonny's eyes were glued to the blade. He whispered. Question. What question? His brother was silent for a bit, and then asked. Where is that which was entrusted to us by the Lord? What have you done with the knives? Knives. What knives? Sonny couldn't recall any knife, and could only think about the one that was already glowing red in the golden brazier. That I don't know. His torturer sighed. Then your penitence can't stop. With that, he took the blade out of the fire and brought it to Sonny's chest, where an aching heart was beating wildly like a caged beast. Sonny searched his memory, desperate for the torture to end. No, he couldn't remember. A split second before the tip of the blade cut his skin, he suddenly shouted. Shadow! Shadow stole it. The ember knife. Shadow took it from me. It was his fault. His. The blade froze without reaching Sonny's flesh. The torturer looked away, a somber expression on his face. It is good that you finally spoke. However, that mystery had been revealed some time ago. After all, Shadow is long dead. He glanced at Sonny, then asked coldly. But what of the other? Where is the ivory knife that I have given you? Did Shadow steal it, as well? Sonny shivered, then slowly shook his head. No. I hid it. I hid it far away. His brother closed his eyes. Where did you hide it? Tears streamed down Sonny's face. He strained in his bindings, desperately trying to free himself. I don't remember. I don't know. The torturer signed, then dropped the searing blade to the ground. Useless. This is all useless. A century of this, and you are still resisting. He grabbed his head and groaned, then suddenly laughed, his voice echoing from the stone walls of the dungeon. I'm tired. I'm more tired of this than you are, brother. Why have you deserted me? I can't save you, no matter what I do. I can't clear away your guilt, I can't redeem you in the eyes of the Lord. He fell silent, and slowly, his face turned calm and solemn. Then, he glanced at Sonny and said, mad resolve shining in his eyes. A century is enough. Going further will only break what is left of you, my dear brother. If we can't redeem your sin, then, we must burn it away. The blessing of the fire, we will invent our own instead of the one you lost. A day finally came when Sonny was freed from his bindings and dragged away from the dungeon cell. He was too weak to fight his jailers, and saw no point in it. He didn't really understand what was happening and was just glad to finally leave the darkness of the torture chamber. He was so happy that tears fell from his amber eyes. Sonny was brought to a vast chamber that was full of terrible heat and drowned by an angry orange glow. Strange, what a strange place. In front of him was a giant pit filled with molten steel. There were giant firs blowing a constant stream of wind into the fire below. He heard the sound of hooves ringing on the stones and saw a mighty horse with blinders on his eyes walk constantly in circles, spinning the wooden wheel it was attached to, which in turn worked the firs. In front of the pit, a strange iron cage lay on the floor. It was made in the shape of a man's body and opened, revealing the human-shaped emptiness within. What is this? Be brave, my brother. Sonny flinched, hearing the familiar voice. He turned his head and saw the torturer standing beside him, with a dark and determined expression on his face. Today, we will burn away your sin, we will make you into the tool of the gods once more. I don't understand. Before Sonny could realize what was happening, he was placed into the strange cage, which was then closed shut, leaving him in utter darkness. His new prison hugged his body like a metal carapace. He couldn't move, or see anything. He was like a soul encased inside the body of an iron man. Panicking, Sonny tried to struggle against his metal prison, but it was of no use. He heard the sound of chains, and felt himself being raised into the air. What? And then, he was lowered down into the giant pit of molten metal. The outsides of his cage grew hot, and then searing. And then, scorching, incinerating, immolating. Locked within the incandescent iron cage, Sonny screamed and screamed, his flesh constantly burning and restoring itself, his broken mind drowning in agony and heat, in the fire. But no matter how much he screamed, the burning was eternal. Just like he himself was. Burning, he was burning. Sonny woke up with a scream, still enveloped in the horror of the nightmare. He shuddered, then clutched at his chest, which was full of sharp, tearing pain. Arg! The shadows rustled around him, distressed by the sudden scream of their master. A nightmare, huh? I haven't had one in centuries. He grimaced, and then stood up, listening to the rattling of the heavenly chains in the distance. It was time to face a new day. Hopefully, his last. Chapter 638 Dream After Dream. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Sonny walked through the empty halls of his castle, shrouded in shadows. Wherever he passed, the pale radiance of moonlight disappeared, devoured by the tide of flowing darkness. His steps were silent, and so were his thoughts. Raising a hand clad in a glove of black silk, he traces his fingers across the intricate engravings, uncaring to remember the events depicted on the ancient stone walls. They were his triumphs and his victories, etched into the annals of history, but all of it was so distant and had happened so long ago, at the dawn of the age of heroes. He had been a hero once, too, battling the remnants of the corruption across the mortal realms. He had been cunning and fearless, valiant and unrelenting, full of faith and hope. The age of heroes was over, but Sonny still remained. By now, all of his servants and warriors had long left, taking the treasures he did not care about anymore with them. The halls of the castle were populated by shadows, and nothing else. Well, except for one loyal fool who was too stubborn to get the hint. Sorry, kid. You should have found a better master. Damnation, why did his heart suddenly hurt so much? Sonny opened the gates to the courtyard, not bothering to close them as he left. This castle of his would be, without a doubt, overtaken by one of the other chain lords soon enough. Or maybe even a ragtag gang of random bandits. He did not care too much about it either. Standing in the darkness, Sonny hesitated, and then took out 2 knives from the hidden sheaths on his forearms. One seemed to be cut from a single piece of ghostly glass, the other from beautiful ember. One was the knife entrusted to him by the Lord of Light, and the other was the one he had stolen. The nightmare he had seen must have been because of a sense of guilt he had not known he felt. But why would he? The fool only had himself to blame for losing the knife to Sonny. And surely, the 2 brothers were not demented enough to come up with something that distasteful, at least not yet. Sonny sighed and shook his head, indifferent to the fate of the other immortals. Then, he turned slightly and watched as a tall figure appeared from the darkness. A towering demon with pale gray skin, 4 arms, and twisting horns approached him and bowed his head, a sorrowful expression contorting the bestial lines of his face. Sonny smiled. Don't look so gloom, kid. You knew that this would happen eventually. The demon didn't answer. Not that he was able to. With another sigh, Sonny hid the ember knife in its sheath, and handed the glass one to the tall creature, who hesitated for a few moments and took it with fear and reverence. Be careful not to drop it. A god made that knife, you know. It is a very precious thing, precious enough that even you aren't suited to wield it. The others will eat you alive if they ever find out. He looked northeast, considering something, and then added. Take it to the Temple of the Chalice and give it to the War Maiden. Tell her. Tell her that we'll meet again, in the realm of shadows. That is my last order to you, kid. After that, you will be free. The demon clenched his fists, then slowly shook his head. Sonny chuckled. And yet, this is how it has to be. Now, go. Your master commands you. The creature looked down, then growled sorrowfully, and disappeared into the darkness. Sonny watched him go. Soon, the towering demon left the castle, crossed the hills of emerald grass, and climbed down to one of the chains leading away from the island. Making sure that the creature was gone, Sonny recalled his shadow scouts and then clicked his tongue. TSK. He didn't even look back once. What a heartless little imp. With that, he walked toward the gates of the castle, followed by a sea of shadows. As he walked, a beautiful black stallion rose from them, his mane as dark as night, with long horns protruding from his head and his teeth resembling that of a wolf more than that of a normal horse. The stallion's eyes burned with menacing crimson flames. Sonny smiled. Greetings, old friend. Will you let me ride on your back one last time? He jumped into the saddle, and sent his terrifying steed galloping across the land. They flew through shadows and raced across the chains that swayed between 2 lightless skies, jumping from one island to another, full of bliss and exhilaration of speed. Ah, this is the one thing I will miss. After centuries of being burdened by the crushing weight of knowledge and duty, Sonny was finally free, and at peace. The night sky above him was vast and beautiful, and so was the one below. Everything was perfect, except for one thing. Why did his heart have to hurt so much? Surely, he didn't have any regrets left. Just before dawn approached, they reached a secluded and lonesome island. Sonny jumped off the horse, patted him on the back, and said his farewells. The steed then turned into a vast, sprawling shadow and disappeared, as though he had never existed at all. The black stallion even made an attempt to hide his heartbreaking grief, to not burden his creator with it, and not turn their final farewell bitter. Sonny remained still for a few moments, and then made his way to the edge of the island. There, he undid the strings of his tunic and bared his chest, then knelt, looking down into the endless darkness of the sky below, the divine flames burning in its depths. The other didn't know yet what awaited them all, none except for maybe Solvain, who had sealed their fates with her merciless hand. Had she known the consequences of her cruel choice? Or had she been simply too blind to see? In any case, Sonny wanted no part of what was to come. He had always prided himself on being a cheat and a coward, and so, he chose an easy way out. The moon was already gone, and the sun had not yet risen. In this darkest of hours, he was surrounded by nothing except shadows and the singing of the wind. A deep sigh escaped from his lips. Dot came like dew, disappears like dew. With that, Sonny raised his hand and, without even flinching, thrust the beautiful ember knife through the intricate scales of the serpent that coiled around his chest. As terrible pain drowned his mind with agony, a pale smile appeared on his face. Free. I am. Finally. Free. His body swayed, and then fell down into the endless abyss of the sky below, disappearing from the edge of the island just as the first ray of sunlight appeared over the horizon. Sonny fell into absolute darkness. Wrapped in its soothing embrace, finally, he died. Sonny woke up. His chest hurt, for some reason. But he couldn't allow himself to sleep any longer. It was time to face anew. What the hell? Doesn't this seem awfully familiar? Chapter 639 Never-Ending Nightmare. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Sonny woke up from a nightmare where he was a shadow that had lost the will to live, who woke up from a nightmare where he was a prince being drowned in a fiery tomb of molten steel, who woke up from a nightmare where he was an old man dying as he held the body of his murdered mother, who woke up from a nightmare where he was a mortal watching his world being destroyed by a god. Soon enough, Sonny found himself tied to a stake, with fire spreading through the pile of tinder beneath his bare feet as a crowd of people whom he had considered friends and neighbors watched with demented glee. All he could do was struggle desperately against his bonds and pray that the smoke would smother him before the flames reached his flesh. But his prayers were not answered. Screaming from inside the fire, he died. It was time to face a new day. Sonny fought desperately as sharp fangs tore his flesh apart, as he was being eaten alive. But no matter how much he struggled, it was of no use. The monster was just too strong, and mad, and cruel. And then, he died. It was time to face a new day again. Sonny drowned, a heavy chain tied around his legs. Sonny bled to death on a battlefield, suffering from terrible thirst and too weak to move, hungry crows tearing at his face with sharp beaks. Sonny watched his entire family be executed before being hanged from the walls of a somber fortress. Thrown into the boundless darkness of the sky below by his heartless mother, Sonny died of hunger, thirst, and fear, too tired to scream or cry. Sonny was killed and turned into a wooden doll by a vengeful sorcerer, and then killed again after an eternity of silent servitude, the doll burning to ashes as it fell into an ocean of white flames. His heart was pierced with an obsidian knife on an altar made of pure darkness. His body was cleaved apart by the blade of a giant warrior in a red tattered robe while the jubilant crowd cheered from the stone seats of an ancient theater. It was time to face a new day again. The nightmares never ended, bleeding into one another. Each time, Sonny woke up sure that the agony he had experienced was just a harrowing dream. But very soon, his waking life would turn into pure horror itself. And then, he would die. And then, it would be time to face a new day again. BL.net Sonny dreamt of being mighty and weak, young and old, men and women, humans and beasts. Their end was always the same. Everywhere he went, everywhere he fled, no matter who he was, there was only pain and death. And madness. It was as though everyone he met was infected by a terrible, unexplainable madness. The whole world was mad. And he was slowly going mad, too. After a while, he found that waking up was getting harder and harder. Sometimes, he failed to differentiate which of his lives was real, and which ones he had just dreamt of. Even though the horrors he had experienced seemed like a nightmare, their weight accumulated, slowly breaking his spirit apart. His faces changed, his memories changed, but one thing always remained the same. The terror. The ever-present, chilling terror of waking up from a nightmare only to be thrust into a worse one instead. And two other things remained the same, as well. The pain in his chest, and the spheres of light that he saw from time to time burning inside someone's soul. Sonny was a soldier in a war between the Ivory City and the Red Colosseum. Consumed by terror, he watched as a brilliant colossus made of lustrous steel stepped forward, making the whole island shake. A giant metal hand slowly moved forward, catching a swift flying ship and crushing the vessel in its enormous fist. And then, the iron giant took another step. Suddenly, the sky disappeared, replaced by a vast expanse of polished metal. The colossus brought his foot down, crushing Sonny, and all of his comrades, into a bloody paste. Sonny died. And then, he woke up with a scream. It was time to face a new day again. That was too much. He shivered, remembering the terrifying sight of the steel giant advancing toward the trembling row of soldiers. Who would be mad enough to challenge the indestructible Sun Prince? Well, he knew who. The warmongers were all insane, each and every one of them. Some said that they had been different and called by another name once, that they had been valiant and brave. Champions who protected the kingdom of hope from the beasts of corruption. But he didn't really believe it. As long as Sonny was alive, and as long as his father was alive, and his grandfather as well, the warmongers had been the same. Bloodthirsty monsters wearing human skins. Luckily, the war was raging far away from here. In the northern reaches of the Kingdom of Hope, people didn't have to worry about the madness of the followers of war, and the misguided righteousness of the followers of Sunday. Granted, they had their own worries. Shuddering and still in the grasp of the nightmare, Sonny massaged his aching chest and rose. Today, his lady was going to meet with the emissaries of the Night Temple. It was a high honor, but also not without risk. As a knight tasked with protecting her, Sonny had to be ready for anything. Why does my heart so much today? Shivering, he reached for his clothes. No. Sonny and a young girl in a beautiful silk dress that was passed down to her from her mother, and for that reason a little bit too long for the girl's awkward figure, had nowhere else to run. The pursuers, who had already slaughtered the rest of their party, chased them to the very edge of the island. Now, there was nothing but the darkness of the sky below in front of them. And behind them, steel hooves were already ringing on the stones, growing closer and closer. The teenage girl stared into the bottomless abyss, then turned to him. Her lips trembled. "Sir, what should we do?" Her face was soft and pale, not yet touched by the sharpness of maturity. Her eyes, usually so gentle and bright, were now dull and full of fear. Sonny hesitated, then drew his sword and turned his back to the abyss. "Don't be afraid, my lady. I'm with you." He said those empty words, knowing full well that it was a lie. He was just one man, he was not even an awakened. What could a mundane swordsman like him do against this foe? The girl, young as she was, knew that he was lying, too. A few moments before the first of the pursuer appeared from the darkness, she grabbed his forearm and looked at him with desperate resolve. Don't let them. Don't let them take me alive, sir. Please." Sonny gritted his teeth, remained silent for a second, and then slowly nodded. His heart hurt. It hurt so much. The pain was almost blinding. A second later, a mighty black stallion appeared in front of them, bearing an armored rider on his back. The rider jumped down, moving with a speed that no mundane human could ever hope to match. He unsheathed his own sword and glanced at Sonny, his eyes hidden behind a visor of a menacing black helmet. His voice sounded like a voice of an ancient monster. "Step aside, warrior. We only need the maiden. You can still walk away alive." Sonny laughed. Why did his heart hurt so much? Dying was already painful enough. He looked at the awakened hunter in front of him, then at the young girl he had sworn to protect. Why does this nightmare never stop? And then, he lowered his sword, and stepped aside. Both of them looked at him, the pursuer with dark amusement, his lady with shock and disbelief. Her voice trembled. "Sir, what are you doing?" Sunny remained silent for a few moments, then sighed. "Why is this world so insane? I am very sorry, my lady. Please, don't hold a grudge against me. But, you see, how do I say this?" He looked at her, then in the direction of the awakened hunter. Then, he shook his head and said, "I am pretty sure that you are not real." Chapter 640 World that has gone mad. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Sunny looked at the terrified young girl, and then, laughed. His laughter sounded more than a little bit unhinged. His lady shuddered. "Sir, you. Sunny waved a hand in the air. No need. I understand. I sound crazy." The night sky above them was covered in an impregnable veil of clouds, and the one below them was empty and dark. The ancient stones they stood upon were slick with rainwater, and it was too dim to see anything except for vague silhouettes. The silhouette of the awakened hunter was towering, menacing, and embodied the very concept of terror. But Sunny didn't care that much. Massaging his chest, he smiled crookedly and said, his voice hoarse and raspy, "But then again, this whole world is insane. Someone told me once, I don't quite remember who, that we can only reflect what is in front of us. Is it my fault that there is nothing in front of me except for madness?" He looked down, his smile turning into a wicked grin. "And someone else once told me that they wanted to destroy the world. Back then, I thought them insane. I think, but now, I wonder." The awakened hunter took a step forward, his monstrous voice permeating the darkness like an insidious murmur. "Weak, so weak, his mind is broken." Sunny laughed again. Yes. I am very, very weak. But I am not weak enough, I guess. Somehow, I have a feeling that I wasn't supposed to be able to last that long. Who would be able to endure that much pain, that much horror, and that much suffering without losing their mind completely? He glanced at his sword, then at the approaching enemy. And yet, I did. Actually, while some of those nightmares, gods, how cruel they were, did hit a nerve, overall. I am surprised to admit that. They really weren't that bad. Sunny stared at the awakened hunter with a concerned expression, then scratched the back of his head. "Crazy, huh? It is almost as if after you have already been gutted once, nothing else can impress you that much. Or if you have already watched your mother die once, the second time won't be as, well, maybe it would. I don't know. I am a bit confused about what is real, and what is not. Maybe I am myself not real. There's one thing I'm sure about, though." The young girl slowly backed away from him, her face painted with fear. The awakened killer tilted his head a little, then asked with curiosity. "What?" Sunny shrugged. "Well, it's that, real or not, I am really hard to break. As it turns out. At least not to the point where I'll be unable to think. And notice things. Oh, and I did notice a few things." He slowly raised his sword and pointed it at the approaching hunter. "One thing I noticed is that my heart always seems ache, doesn't matter whether it's in a nightmare or in the real life. So, that demands a question. If the heartache is the same, then maybe the nature of both the dream and the reality is the same, as well." He took a step forward, a confused expression on his face. "The second thing I noticed was that many of my thoughts, actions, and reactions don't really make sense. Sometimes my hands will try to do something on their own, and sometimes fragments of feelings, ideas, and judgments that I have to cause to possess will just appear on their own. Easy to explain in a dream, not so much in the waking world. And I am awake, am I? Or am I? Or am I not? Sometimes, it's hard to say. He laughed again and assumed a defensive position, waiting for the terrifying awakened hunter to attack. Well, and the last thing I noticed were the radiant spheres of light I seemed to be able to see inside the souls of living beings, or vile orbs of darkness in those of the corrupted. It took me a few nightmares to realize that those were soul cores. Strangely, once again, this ability pursued me from the nightmares into reality, making the two seem so much alike. So, with all that said, I am really only curious about one thing. Sunny smiled, ready to meet his death, once more. You see, in my nightmares, I met all kinds of creatures. Awakened warriors, corrupted monsters, even transcendent immortals. Some of them had one soul core, some 2 or 3. He lingered for a moment, and then looked past his enemy, at the mighty black steed standing motionless behind him, barely visible in the shadows. So, my question is, why does this damned horse always have 6? With that, he dashed in the opposite direction from where the hunter's sword flashed, abandoning the young girl he was sworn to protect without a second thought. Sliding on the wet stones, Sunny dove under the flying blade and jumped to his feet, putting all of his weight into an attack of his own. However, his strike was not directed at the menacing killer, instead, it was directed at the tenebrous steed. Unobstructed, the tip of the sword touched the mighty beast's onyx coat, and shattered, as if striking adamantine stone instead of a living being. In the next moment, the awakened hunter's blade pierced him from behind, exiting out of Sunny's chest in a fountain of blood. Ignoring the terrible pain and the blood that was flowing from his mouth, Sunny grinned and looked at the motionless horse. The stallion looked at him back, his eyes dark and full of boundless, terrifying malevolence. A gargling laughter escaped from Sunny's lips. Doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. Kill me again, bastard, kill me as many times as you want. In this nightmare, I am just a mundane swordsman, but in the next one, or the one after that, or the one after that, I'll be someone powerful enough to rip you to shreds. And then I will kill you again, and again, and again. Let's see which one of us is going to break first, you wretched pony. The black steed looked down at Sunny, his eyes igniting with ghostly crimson flames. He snorted quietly, and then opened his mouth, full of sharp teeth that were more like those of a wolf than that of a horse. And then, the nightmare bit down on the trembling human's head, easily crushing it between his mighty jaws. Sunny died. And woke up with a tortured scream. It was time to face a new day. He rolled out of the dingy tent he had been sleeping in and grinned, mad sparks igniting in his dark eyes. It was time to hunt an evil horse.